All right, welcome back, guys, to a new episode of Paranormal Planet. I have missed you guys. I've been gone I haven't been able to do Paranormal Planet for a few weeks just because of time issues. I was able to get out a investigative video for you guys. Hopefully, some of you have been able to check that out. Has to do with the hitchhiker effect, and basically what I did was I narrated, if you will, a certain section of George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and it really sort of relays the very first inkling that they had that this effect, now known as the hitchhiker effect, was part and parcel of the overall UFO phenomenon as they now understand it to be. This whole idea is sort of revolutionizing ufology, the theories that we have regarding what the craft are, where they're from, how they operate, etc. All kind of have to be seen in the light of the hitchhiker effect, as they call it. So check that video out if you've not been able to do so. It's something that we will be discussing on an ongoing basis, just because knowledge of it really has revolutionized how I think about paranormal research and investigation. Maybe some investigators out there haven't yet tackled that. I just don't know, and I don't have time really to pay attention to a lot of stuff that's going on out there in the paranormal world because I'm so deeply involved in the research that I'm in currently. So I struggled for a long time on how to really present the ideas in this show. And really, it's just such a vast topic, the things that I've come across recently. And so I figured I'll just kind of bounce around, talk about them. Hopefully you guys will come up with good questions as we go along. If there's something that out there that you guys want to ask, get on the live chat and put it into all caps so that I notice the question, and I'll be happy to try to get to that for you. I recognize that this is a complex subject. We're going to be discussing the idea of a worldwide UFO grid, and the idea that not only does a grid exist around the planet that exhibits a natural form of energy, and in ancient times these were called ley lines, but also the idea that certain UFOs, or perhaps all of them, we don't quite yet know, appear to only be able to travel on this grid. And there is some very interesting information to back that up, some of which I'm going to read for you guys tonight. So if you've not joined us on Paranormal Planet before, let me welcome you. I'm Jack Carey, your host, and this is the podcast where we discuss the cutting edge in paranormal research. We discuss the latest and the greatest ideas and theories. And this is a place where we openly muse about various possibilities given the known evidence that is available currently. And so what we're going to, first thing I wanted to show you guys was before we get started here, was the news feed that you can find on our Facebook page. So let me share a screen with you guys. And if you go to Facebook, you can find us under Paranormal Intelligence Agency. I wanted you guys to make sure you go over and take a look, because during the week, the PIA Facebook page works as a paranormal news aggregator. So through open source intelligence gathering that basically I do here at the PIA all week long, all of these various paranormal stories pop up with lots of intelligence in them. Here's one, for instance: mysterious antenna-like growth inside the brain is linked to perception of time. You'll definitely want to read that, because that is truly fascinating. Without this little growth, we would have no concept of time. Wouldn't that be nice? It just wouldn't not exist. And think about that when you're reading this article about how this biological construction ends up being what's responsible for our concept of time, even Einstein. So I mean, that's really fascinating. So check us out on Facebook. Come by, like the page, and you will be able to see all of these paranormal news stories as they pop up. I wanted to point out a couple of these. One of these is really interesting. A woman discovered, they're calling it a baby Loch Ness monster on the beach. And it is really mystifying, this body that they found. It's a tiny little thing. It's got plesiosaur-like body construction to it. And so it's fascinating. Article also to take a look. It's very short, but it's got pictures of the creature. Take a look at that. And so come by, check us out there. There's one particular article that I came across that is extremely pertinent to our conversation tonight, and that is this article: How the Physics of Resonance Shapes Reality. And we're going to be talking about this. Now, I'll read you the little byline here. The same phenomenon by which an opera singer can shatter a wine glass also underlies the very existence of subatomic particles. So this whole idea, the physics of resonance, the physics of harmonic geometrics, are things that we're going to have to begin to explore and discuss on an ongoing basis. Because it appears to be so central a component to the overall UFO mystery. Some of you probably have read my book, Paranormal Planet. Some of you probably have not. I urge you to pick up a copy and read Paranormal Planet. Not only does it help to keep the lights on here at the PIA and keep the research going, but in it I present my unified field theory of paranormal activity. And the unified field theory of paranormal activity is something that I developed after nearly 30 years of investigation, actual field investigation into paranormal cases. And I realized that there was a vast array of paranormal activity that all appeared to have a singular source. And a lot of this went back to the idea that there were various areas around the United States, which was obviously my primary place of operation, and that these various areas, and this was also been noticed by as far back as Jonathan Keel. And as we'll see tonight, on a much wider scale, a famous investigator, intelligence agent / turned cryptozoologist / ufologist named Ivan T. Sanderson, who also discussed the same thing on a wider scale, that there are areas where a wide array of paranormal activity seems to take place in a relatively small geographic space. Now, in the United States, these are all areas identified as having very large quartz crystal deposits. Now, I developed a theory in my unified field theory of paranormal activity that the actual mechanism taking place is called the Mach effect. Now, this is something I came across just studying science. And there's a scientist out there, and he's built what's called a Mach effect thruster. And this is what he thinks will be a future form of space travel. And to kind of make a lot of difficult theory easy to understand, as a body of mass travels through space, there are naturally occurring minute fluctuations in that body of mass. This scientist figured out a way to harness the energy coming out of those little fluctuations and turn it into a propulsion source, thereby achieving a kind of 0 point energy, if you will. The idea of a ball in motion stays in motion and is kind of behind this whole thing. That's fascinating because I realized on a planetary scale, the Earth too was a body of mass traveling through space. Therefore, it must also have minute fluctuations going on. And if those minute fluctuations are taking place on a planetary scale, it proves logically that they would be compressing these very large deposits of quartz crystals in these areas where all of this paranormal activity is occurring, including UFO activity, profound UFO activity. And when it compresses the quartz crystal, it creates electromagnetic fields that are so strong that they literally can tear a hole in the electromagnetic membrane that separates our dimension from other dimensions. Now, when it tears the hole in this membrane, you can have intermittent activity take place, and we describe that activity as paranormal, even though it's occurring through a natural mechanism. Now, there's a gentleman, as I just mentioned, named Ivan T. Sanderson, who came up with the idea of what he called the vile vortices. And this is where things kind of get a little more complicated. So I wanted to bring up, let's see here if I can find the exact. Now, the vile vortices, let me explain exactly what he meant by vile vortices. So he basically discovered the same thing, but on a much wider scale. And you're talking about a guy whose book, by the way, if you're interested in some of this information, you can find it in Ivan T. Sanderson's The Reality of Underwater UFOs, Invisible Resonance. By the way, Ivan T. Sanderson was way ahead of his time. This man was a true genius. He was an intelligence agent. His writing is complex, and because of that, you will find yourself rereading certain paragraphs, and it's just because of how intelligent the man was. And what he discovered was that all around the world, there were triangles, 12 of them he discovered. Actually, they're lozenge shape, so it's kind of like that, is what they ended up discovering, but I'll show that in just a little bit. And these areas, which stretch in a band around the planet, are all areas where you have vanishings, complete vanishings, like the Bermuda Triangle, right? And he talks about the Bermuda Triangle and how the Bermuda Triangle is not really a triangle. It kind of stretches way off into the edge, and it's a real thing, but it's not exactly triangular shaped. It's more like a lozenge shape. And so he makes a big point of that because geometrically speaking, that's important. Now, he identifies these areas as being places where you have ships, submarines, aircraft, people on board craft who go vanish completely, yet the craft is left. And it occurs on such a wide scale in these various areas that from a mathematical probability perspective, it shouldn't exist. He was able to identify these places simply through the vanishings, and from there began to plot them around the globe, right? This guy, this Sanderson, he was a scientist, and he was part of basically the Royal Society of Scientists in England. And he kind of posed this whole problem to these guys and said, hey, you got these ideas, and, you got these people vanishing, and these are the areas. And some of these scientists were like trigonometry experts, as he explains in his book. And so they took a globe and they plotted the areas all around the globe. And then one of these guys took some skewers and he poked it right through the middle of one of the lozenges, completely through the globe, out the other side, and it came out right through the middle of another one. He did it again, it happened again, and again, and it happened again. Then they took the globe and they cut it carefully right in half, and all those skewers were perfectly going right through the center of the planet. That should be impossible if the data by which he developed his vile vortices idea was an error. In other words, if his data about the vanishing people didn't lead him to plot these places around the world, and a mathematician then to show the geometric construction perfectly of these areas, that shouldn't happen by chance. And so you have an example here of where geometry was able to corroborate paranormal research on a planetary scale. It's just crazy. Let me bring this up and show this to you guys. Okay. On Google Earth, this is roughly where those vortices are. It's pretty interesting. Now you'll notice that there's only 10 plotted. The 11th and 12th are the North and South poles. And some of you may be well aware that Admiral Byrd, among others, believed that there was an entrance at the South Pole that basically leads into an inner Earth area, which is interesting, probably at both poles. Now let me bring up a little bit older view of what this looks like. And you can see how the triangles themselves form larger triangles. And it spreads all the way around the world like this. And trust me, I'm working on an actual model of all of that. Now, if you were interested in those exact locations, here are those exact locations. And they're not exactly where you would expect them to be. What is fascinating, however, is that these are all places that, when they are plotted out, fall on ancient ley lines. So this is fascinating because of a man named Pythagoras. And Pythagoras, as some of you know, is basically the father of mathematics. Pythagoras was an initiate of an ancient mystery school. They worshiped numbers, came up with the whole idea of the harmony of the spheres, etc. And I'll read you a few things about those. About the vanishings, though, I want to bring this up. Ivan T. Sanderson had the idea that the world itself is a ball of electricity, right? Everything is electrical, including the human body. And he thought that it might very well be that there are naturally occurring fields and mechanisms already existing in nature that are just sitting there dormant until we come by with some of our equipment and perturb it. And then it sets things in motion that allows for one of these vanishings to occur, allows for it to literally slip into another dimension, to another time, another place. And this is what he says. I wanted to read this to you because really you can't do better than the man's own words, can you? So let's check this out. He says, what I am driving at is this. Let us suppose that the radio contacts, and he's talking about the 5 Avenger planes that went missing in the Bermuda Triangle. Everybody's quite familiar with that. Let us suppose that the radio contacts of the 5 Avenger planes were using a frequency X, which just happened to lock into phase with some natural frequency in the area over which they were flying. Say a vortex caused by a cold whirlpool of lower air over a hot sea surface, as per the bowels of Mercury, and hurricanes to produce something quite else, which happened to be the trigger that set off other natural procedures in that area. What might not happen? He asks. I will not speculate on this because we do not know what, if any, connection there is between whatever purely mechanical, electromagnetic, and gravitic forces there may be, though, as we have noted above, scientists are rapidly working toward a possible unified theory of what they call fields, as per Einstein and others who have come after him. All I am trying to say is that the oddities, enigmas, and horrors allegedly noted in the vortices may be entirely natural and indigenous to certain areas of our Earth's surface and be perfectly stable therein until we come along and upset their balance. In other words, the best way to discover just what the potentialities of these areas is would be to analyze just what we and our devices really do. So it's very interesting. He believes that it's possible that some of our electronic equipment is triggering this effect within these areas. Not only that, But he thinks that it can also occur on an individual biological basis. That is extremely pertinent to the whole missing 411 mystery, right? Because here are people in areas that I've described earlier with these massive quartz crystal deposits, areas that all have a wide array of paranormal activity taking place, including vanishing people. And it's possible that something happens in the environment. Certain fields are set up perfectly that when a person with the right frequency comes through, it sets certain things in motion that allows for this mechanism to take effect, this vanishing mechanism. Now that's fascinating, but getting back to the grid and how all of this works, I came across the work of a man named Bruce L. Cathy. And Bruce L. Cathy, who wrote a book called The Energy Grid, oh, there you go. You can see that, along with quite a few others, seems to have stumbled across a fascinating secret, because it was Bruce Cathy who describes what he believes to have discovered, which is a network, a vast grid system on which UFOs have to travel. And he says they have to travel on this system because of the natural laws of geometric harmonics. And I won't pretend for a second that we're going to cover this entire subject on this one show, because this is going to take probably multiple shows, I'm sure, to fully kind of discuss and get into the full idea of what these two, because when you take what Sanderson discovered and you take what Bruce Cathy discovered and you put them together with what we know right now with the UFO phenomenon, and you're getting a huge glimpse, I believe, into what is really occurring on this planet. On top of that, I like to bring up continually to you guys that there are two constants. Well, let's make it three, shall we? Three constants with the UFO phenomenon. One, nuclear material and or detonations. Two, the hitchhiker effect. And three, vanishing people. Now, it's very interesting because Cathy believes that nuclear devices, and he's right about this, are in themselves space-time geometric devices. And this is where things get a little complicated, right? When you detonate a nuclear device, you are bending space and time in a very small locality. He believes that UFOs also use harmonic geometrics in order to propel themselves. There is a vast amount of actual mathematic equations he offers to prove his points, things which does us no good to get into the actual mathematics. There are a lot of what ifs here. Take for example Trinity, which we now know, if you've seen the Trinity UFO video that I've done, the investigative video dealing with Jacques Vallée's new work investigating the Trinity crash, you'll know that that crash occurred 20 days after the nuclear test at Trinity. Kathy says that in order to detonate one of these devices on the ground that way, it has to be positioned at a certain spot, geometrically speaking, at a certain time in order for the detonation to occur. Here, you have the exact same spot, relatively speaking, within an 8-mile radius, where you have a UFO crash 20 days after we detonate a nuclear device, a geometric space-time bending device, right on one of these geometric harmonic spots that make up the grid that they travel on. In other words, you're traveling down a highway that you haven't gone down in a while, and some crazy primate blew a hole in the middle of the highway and you just went. That's basically what we're talking about. This is the grid system that they have to use to travel on, because their craft are specifically designed in order to take advantage of the naturally occurring energy of geometric harmonics. And when you interrupt that mechanism, they crash. Now, it's quite possible that some of our radars were strong enough in the past to cause some of these craft to crash. That has been speculated. However, it appears as though their fascination with our nuclear devices are because our nuclear devices have the capability of altering space-time geometrics. And it's because they operate under the principle of space-time geometrics and the mathematics of the harmonics of light waves and the speed of light, which is intimately tied to gravity. So this is what we're looking at. This is kind of giving us a new and fresh glimpse into what really might be taking place. And on top of that, if you can understand that their craft, the reason why they don't need a propulsion system is because their craft are constructed so perfectly, geometrically speaking, that they tap naturally into this geometric harmonic power that permeates the entire universe. And what they do is they create an imbalance in ratios between the geometrics, and they simply jump from point to point. And when they jump, it makes the harmonics go back into balance again. So that is kind of where we are. I know how complex that is, and I can spend hours discussing this because this has kind of opened a whole new realm of investigation for me personally into the UFO phenomenon and trying to understand how the UFO phenomenon is responsible for the hitchhiker effect. And how is that tied overall to the ability of nuclear fusion, let's say, to alter space and time? Now, there's a couple of other researchers out there in the world that have also kind of honed in on the idea that the entirety of the hitchhiker effect can be traced back to a singular non-human intelligence that appears to be concentrated at Skinwalker Ranch. However, that non-human intelligence may have entered this planet through a nuclear fusion event that took place naturally. And somebody asked, what is the difference between UFO craft and UAPs? Absolutely nothing. You know why they came up with UAP? Because using the term UFO makes them look stupid, because all they did was vilify and make fun of all of the UFO people for the past 70 years. So for them now to use the acronym UFO makes them look really stupid. So they came up with UAP. Tic Tac UFOs aren't dimensional. Yeah, I don't know. Cliff High has been right about some things, has been wrong about some things. And we have to realize that all theories are equal until one is proven true. And anyway, I wanted to read this very interesting point that Bruce Cathy makes. Now, you have to understand, Bruce Cathy knows when he wrote all of this, and this is copyrighted 1990. Invisible Resonance, copyrighted 1970. That's how long ago, right? Which means Sanderson was working on it, back in the 60s. So Cathy knew nothing about the hitchhiker effect, knew nothing about its relationship to UFOs. He only understood that UFOs tend to show up around nuclear areas, around volcanoes, and around earthquakes. Guess where all the volcanoes and earthquakes on the Earth are plotted when you put them down on the globe onto his grid system? They all fall exactly on the node points where you would expect there to be a harmonic perturbation of some kind. So here is what he says. It was also noted that at various positions on the edges of the polygons, scientists have discovered regions of seismic and volcanic activity. Magnetic anomalies are likewise found at the vertices of the polygons. The nodes of the grid are centers of great change in atmospheric pressure, and hurricanes form in these areas, veering off to follow the paths of intersection formed by the interlocking patterns. Prevailing winds and ocean currents also fit into the network, something that exactly is talked about by Ivan T. Sanderson. An extremely interesting point of the system is in the African Republic of Gabon. According to the scientist, a natural atomic reactor was recently discovered there, which was active 1.7 billion years ago. This caused a mass of uranium-235 to reach a level of chain reaction. Oddly enough, this piece of evidence backs up the information published in my first two books regarding the geometric nature of atomic reactions. Certain modern-day atomic stations must be constructed on geometric locations in order to function efficiently, breeder stations in particular. An atomic bomb is a geometric device which necessitates geometric positioning for detonation. So, and one other very interesting point, and all of this is tied together. So listen to this. And he never once mentions anything regarding Ivan T. Sanderson. Man himself, the authors say, and by the authors, he's talking about these Russian scientists, which I now have their research, and it is fascinating. Man himself, the authors say, has not escaped the influences of the energy emitted by the grid lattice. Many of the ancient cultures seem to have flourished on intersections of the system. The mind of man is evidently tapped into the very circuitry of the ball of energy that constitutes the world that provides his home. Most startling of all is the revelation in their article that to line the system up on the surface of the globe so that all these different factors could be correlated, the point they located as position 1 was that of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. So, let me tell you something about the Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. You remember how I just showed you where they said how the physics of resonance shapes reality? The same phenomenon by which an opera singer can shatter a wine glass also underlies the very existence of subatomic particles. Remember me reading that earlier? Think about it like this. You walk into a room, and at one end of the room, there's a beautiful lady, and she's playing the violin. At the other end of the room is a piano, and the piano is empty, but the lid's propped up. You can walk over to the piano and look down at the strings, and each note that she plays at the other end of the room will vibrate the right string. That's harmonic resonance. The idea that if you can vibrate in perfect frequency and vibration with another body, material body, you can create instantaneous change within it. Now, let me tell you something about the pyramids. If you take the average, the mean, as they call it, of the sides of the Great Pyramid, and you subtract the mean of the sides of the second largest pyramid, you come up with a tiny fraction. That fraction is 0.0136. 0.0136 is known as the particle of Pythagoras. And it is key to the idea and to the mechanism behind harmonic geometrics. Now, let me really blow your mind. When you take the mass of our star and you compare it to the mass of Sirius B, it leaves a very small discrepancy. And guess what that discrepancy is? 0.0136, meaning that there is an automatic, naturally occurring harmonic resonance between the Sirius star system and our star. And there is a tribe in Western Africa called the Dogon who trace their lineage all the way back to ancient Africa. And they claim that every year on July 23rd, which they call the Day of the Bado, a very special signal emits from Sirius and interacts with our star. And because of that, it affects biological life on our planet. So what you're seeing is a universal mechanism on a planetary scale that is then being used on the micro scale by these craft. And all of that was encapsulated in our ancient megalithic structures around the world. So that's what I've got for you tonight, guys. I know that there's going to be a million questions probably as you're going to sleep tonight. I do believe some UFOs are interdimensional, as Vincent N says there. So thanks for being with me again. Come by and check out Paranormal or the paraintelagency.com. That's where you will find all of my latest and greatest paranormal reports. If you subscribe to the site, I thank you in advance. It is how the PIA really supports itself. And it's a year-long subscription. So you get to read all those reports for a year for like $20. So it's a good deal. So thanks, everybody, for showing up. And I will see you next week. And we will be talking about the harmonic grid. I'm going to talk about all of this in relationship to cryptid animals, because there's an interesting plug-in to all of this. So anyway, thanks, guys, for being with me. I will see you next week. Until then, just be careful out there. Crazy world.